Hi there, and thank you for clicking on this video. So the 2023 usage stats got released. Everybody's making a video on it. I'm not any different, but I'm going to talk about some of the lower usage weapons um, and frames. Like Caliban has a bad reputation about like usage. Like you get onto the bottom. Stalker, obviously circuit only. Excal Prime, it's a founder. And then you see a bunch of frames that are either new, like Corvex is new, and ones that have primes. Like obviously Baruch wasn't incredibly popular to begin with, but he has a prime, so he's definitely going to be less popular. Grendel Prime is not the newest prime, but he's the last prime. I honestly figured this one would be a little higher, even though the list only goes to the 12th of last year, or to the 31st of last year. So it's got to be like usage over the year, right? So he was only around for a couple of months, so still pretty solid. Oberon didn't help where his farm got moved. It's Railjack. Caliban is kind of surprising. Caliban, especially now that the arcanes are so readily available, which is a good thing. Caliban is kind of a steel path stomper at lower levels, especially because of the shield changes. Like because we have 70 or not, wasn't 75%, but like 50% damage reduction on shields. He regens shields. We have things like Arcane Aegis, and even if you have like a rank 0, it's still fine because it's more about having the shields regenning at all. So Caliban for Steel Path is honestly surprisingly okay. He's not great. Obviously, one of the main issues with him is he's an armor farm. But I just sort of wanted to talk about this is like the worst frame, more or less, that doesn't have a prime and isn't brand new. Like Corvex is 0.13, Caliban is 0.16. Corvex is the newest frame. He's also a standing turn-in for the new area. So his farm's really easy. It's literally turn in, standing, get parts, right? Caliban, you gotta earn him through normal bounties, and those can be a bit of a pain in the ass. And I think that's the thing that's dropping him down significantly lower. Let's go to the heat map. And if you notice, obviously the lower levels are going to have trouble getting him because it's like a new warframe. You can see he spikes a little bit later. So the higher MR players are getting what he is a little bit more. And obviously as you get higher, like way farther in, the type of content people at like super endgame, they're going to be way more specialized. And Caliban does sort of lose his identity there because he does have some issues that are sort of deal breakers for like level caps and stuff like that. Especially because they nerfed his shield regen, right? Obviously, Baruch's doing really solid. But you can see the usage goes up. You see the lower MRs just aren't going to have access to like the new war. Maybe you got some people down here that bought him. Or down at the Mastery Rank 0, you're going to have people that maybe are doing like the MR0 challenge or purchase. That's where this is going to come from. But the issue with him is he did receive a bit of a nerf, and it was his 3, and it was detrimental. His shields don't regen when you go down to 0. So because of the fact that we got a new shield mod, Primed Redirection, it was a buff to Caliban. The shield changes were a buff to Caliban. Aegis is a massive buff to Caliban. And even like a really conservative build will enable him to do Steel Path super easy. Even if you don't use a helmet, the one thing that's really easy about Caliban is he has a helmet slot, and it's his one. And honestly, I would recommend always helmeting this off, which I really wouldn't say for most frames. But his one is, and I use this term like candidly, it's kind of dog shit. You can kind of make it work. The 4 is like a grouping ability, but it deals slash damage, so you don't care about the armor strip or the defense strip really. Lethal Progeny is a shield gate. You can get some pretty nutty numbers out of this, especially at way higher strengths, where you're running like the 200, 200, 100% efficiency, 200% duration build. You can get really solid numbers out of this. So the build that I would recommend, it is a bit of a later game because this is a new warframe. A new warframe. So you're gonna have mods. You're gonna be using them in Steel Path. At least you would regularly use them in Steel Path. Just by nature of the fact that you basically have to have Steel Path unlocked to even attempt getting this guy, right? Because you have to go through the new war. The big combo for him is literally just Prime Redirection, Adaptation, and Arcane Aegis with a little bit of energy economy, like say Equilibrium or Nourish. We're gonna combine everything, and obviously Brief Respite isn't gonna supply gate for you, but it does allow you to skip the shield gate, if you will, and get you right back in to having your shields regenning. So because of the way, say, like the Topaz Shard with blast damage, or say like regen from a Aegis, like you can't trigger it if you don't have shields, but if you walk around a corner and get popped, and you hit your shield gate in one tick, you need to have shields available so your 3 can be regenning. And so your Topaz Shard can actually be providing you with shields. So this is a way to sort of kickstart that. It's kind of where Brief Respite is, unless you want to go to the catalyzing shield route, which is a completely different build. If you really want a shield gate with him, more power to you. I find his abilities, besides his 3, being way too slow to be able to shield gate with. But this is a way to jumpstart it. Your shields get popped. Cast your 3 times. Get those shields regenning with adaptation and its passive, which gives you 50% additional damage reduction. It's multiplicative, so you have adaptation for 90% on to the main damage type on an enemy weapon. So against the infested, it would be like 90% DR, but like everything else, it ends up averaging about 50%. You have like a true 50% from his passive, plus it's an aura. Stacks very favorably with things like Citrine, basically an instant 95% DR. And just his natural tankiness, plus the damage reduction from his shields. So you have 90% theoretically, and then 50% and 50%. So it's 97.25% damage reduction on his shields, which is more than enough for Steel Path. Even though it's a shield tank. The flex slot is Rapid Resilience on this build. If you want to run Molt Augmented, if you're doing like a bit of a longer mission, it'll stack up, give you the 200%. His main gate in terms of like you get something or you don't get something is on his 4. It's a PowerPoint that you need to hit or at least be like cognizant of. He has a defense strip, so a debuff amount. He's at 165. I could also, I'm not going to be doing it this build. It didn't bother me. I like running Molt Augmented, and just double casting it for the little bit that it takes. But you could run Corrosive Projection with 165 and just get the full armor strip right off the bat. It's not going to give you the shield strip. So you would lose the instant shield strip, or at least being able to scale into it like we are now. But you would get the armor strip, which is arguably a bigger deal. Also, something to consider is precision intensify. You'll take this off. I've got one strength red for ability strength, and two casting speed, and a topaz shield on blast damage. This helps out Caliban a lot with a shield regen, keeping the shields up, and basically, unless you get like your shields one shot, like literally they just pop because of a damage that you take, you're gonna be able to regen your shields because there's so much damage reduction on this frame, particularly for shields, right? And the regen. Um, so if you're not too concerned about the strip, or you just want your shields to be regenning at all, or you're running like a weapon with like an explosive, like a explosion on it, say like the Exceltra, um, is really solid for this. If you run like a single topaz shard, if you got a flex slot on your shard setup, you can run on a launcher, right, where it has blast on the AoE, which is where it is a lot of times. You can run that and get like shield regen passively, and it's pretty effective. Um, you can run if you're not too concerned about this, or you still want the strip, but you don't want to worry about like the detriment to transient fortitude, like the duration. This does work as well, and you can just like augmented scale as it wants, or just deal with the shields at whatever they are and just leave it the way it is. Precision intensify is 90. The shard is 10. That gives you 200, which will give you the debuff amount. You can see it in the info tooltip. So you'll still get your full strip. Everything else will be weaker, but if you're comfortable running that, you can get rid of augmented and get your shield regen from another place. Use the topaz shard, which is what I was doing for Steel Path generally. Is I'll use like an Exceltra. It felt really comfortable. And between a Aegis, Brief or Spite, the little sentient dudes running around, they're obviously going to be weaker. They're going to do less damage. They're going to have less health. You can just recast it without the negative on duration for how long they last. And I'll show you how he works. It's not really a big deal. Plenty of people have made videos on it, so we're not going to go through the whole thing. But you can get his 4 up to, I'd say, like 1,000,000 damage with viral procs, which is still pretty chunky. It requires some setup. But even with these guys, the 2 is a vulnerability. The 1 is garbage. I'm not even going to cover it. 3 is you get 3 little extra dudes. They're kind of bugged right now. But when you press 2, gives them, these guys a vulnerability. It's also a decent CC. The 4 is the strip. You can see it instantly. It's a defense strip. It's also got a slight drag in effect. And if you have like AoEs, like the Sancti Castanas, which we will be talking about, you can... It feels like it pulls them in further on this. When they're hovering, makes sense. They're a little easier to move around. Obviously, this isn't going to help you against Eximus. But that's the simple philosophy. He really needs casting, though, to speed that up. So if you're willing to double casting speed shard, like you have like some extra yellow ones, or even like 1 yellow Tau. But honestly, that feels like a bit of a waste. I'd say just use the 2 regular, or use the flex slot with rapid resilience, to maybe put natural talent there also. I've been getting pretty comfortable using rapid resilience on them because one of the main issues is magnetic procs, right? Doing lots of the new bounty areas for Whisper in the Walls. Magnetic procs are Not a massive issue, but they are an issue. So the faster that shit goes away, the faster I can start regenning shields. And if you receive like a dot or something like that, like because you're running through and there's those vials everywhere that drop like corrosive material on you, um, you get lots of puncture procs and stuff like that. The faster that shit goes away, the faster you get your damage back, the faster you get your armor back. Not that that matters on this build. Um, so there are debuffs that are pretty apparent. But magnetic's the big one. So pretty basic. I like the transient fortitude though. Personal preference, but if you have precision intensify and you want to run that build, it feels pretty good. Even doing Netracells. Okay, so Netracell running in the new bounty area, the Exterminate Steel Path. It's basically the Volatile Eximus with that ground grenade. One shots your shields. Everything else you can still just face tank. Right? So pretty standard Caliban gameplay. Um, so the other thing I wanted to talk about, and we'll do a Netracell mission. And this was one that really surprised me. This is a super strong weapon here. The Sancti Castanas. So you have the Lotto Prime, which is a Founder's weapon, Detron. There's a Tenet version, Spectra, there's a Vandal version, Akbolto, Prime, Brack, there's a Kuva version, Acrid is just old as shit. Telos, Akbolto, got Power Crept, still pretty decent though. Ak Bronco, Prime. So the Sancti Castanas is the first weapon here where it's people, and this is the good version of the Castanas. So this is like the first weapon that we have where it's like the good version, like even the Rakta, right? There's the Ballistica Prime, but the Sancti Castanas, I'm surprised they're down here, especially considering the content that we're doing. These are decently strong against the Murmur, especially when you're just running bounties, and especially combined with Caliban in this circumstance. Took advantage of Caliban's abilities with the shield regen. It's pretty easy to keep Overguard up. So this was sort of like a circumstantial pick. Obviously, you would go Merciless here because you're dealing with dots. You can make it work with other stuff. For me, the sweet spot with these guys is being right below, right about 3 multi-shot. Reason being, is if you go over, because you have 2, right? 2 in the magazine. You can only have, it won't let you fire. Okay, there we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the limit. Even if you reload, like I'm clicking. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm clicking and it won't let me fire. There's a cap on what you can have out. So 4's got to be the Egret. So 5 for the Castanas. But the fact is that you can get more out provided you haven't hit this cap. So if you can throw out 4, you won't hit the cap. It will allow you to throw again. And you can sort of get over the cap a little bit, right? And then you have the AoE detonation. So 6. Right? And now I can't cast. So it won't let you go over. So there's the cap where it'll prevent you from casting. But you can multi-shot over it. And that helps a bunch. So 6, if you have 3, that means you throw out the thing twice. You hit 6. That's a pretty decent amount considering that there's a cap. Ideally, you could do like 4 and then do 8, and that would further increase your damage. But 3's pretty easy. Just a simple galvanized diffusion. The build's pretty simple. Obviously, you're not going to have this riven. So you'd put something in here like this. These are all obviously farmable. Obviously, this is a later game build. 8 Forma into it. You could do something like crosshairs. I would recommend it against the Murmur because hitting headshots on them, there's a lot of them where they don't really have easily accessible headshots. But there is a neat trick to this. We'll bring out the Castanas. So obviously no bonus. I threw them. And when I detonate, as long as I'm aiming when I throw, it doesn't matter when I detonate. The projectiles, the little grenades, will get the or trigger the bonus when I put them out. See, there's no impact damage. Like there's no damage on impact. So I can cast. I'm obviously not zoomed. And then they get the crit buff, right? So it is usable. It's obviously easier to hit against these guys. The other ones have smaller weak points. So if you want to deal with that, and you don't mind throwing your weapons like that, go ahead. It'll get you pretty heavily into oranges. Base damage, you need a ton of it. But the reason why I'm surprised about this the most is because of the melee weapons. The Zorus and the Glaive Prime. The two big reasons for this is obviously the Zorus is a quest reward, right? Doing the Proteus quest. But the reason why it's so easy to get so much damage onto this as quickly as possible, or as much as possible, is because it's a force proc, right? It's a force electric proc. The Glaive Prime is a force slash proc. So you basically free up a mod. Most of the glaives have a forced proc associated with them. Like the Halakar is like forced blast. Path assist is forced viral. But most Orvius is cold, right? Most of them have a forced proc associated with them. Now, the Zorus and the Glaive have a forced dot, which is a nice thing, right? Well, this weapon has a forced electric proc. Like, the electric procs that you saw, I didn't have to, like, status chance them. And if you notice, there's no status chance. Like, the status chance isn't high enough to it's not 100%. It doesn't guarantee a proc. It's 34%, so you can potentially status proc twice, but it's a forced electric. And it's got the corrosive thing, the passive for corrosive and 25 meters. So if you want, if you don't have the murmur, or say here, you could do jolt and get a 54% chance of double procking electricity. And because of the way the Murmur are in terms of what they're weak against, this actually does pretty decent damage. Let's grab the noodles. So 24... Now we're up to 45, 80k, I'm seeing. Because you can throw so many. And obviously I haven't stacked up anything. So 78k, 68k, 27k. The numbers are going to be all over because there's an AoE associated with it. And now we'll get our crit chance. Now we got some oranges. 24k, 50k, 76k. 95k, 82k. The damage goes way up. And you can sort of tweak your build to taste. I like the crit. It's obviously, you know, build to taste. Especially if you're not going to be, you're obviously not going to always be fighting the Murmur. But the fact is that the Zorus still has to deal with an electricity 90 mod. Well, the Castanas got a 165. Its dot, without the throne multipliers, the mods for that, it's going to have a high, like a really high innate electricity on it. Because of the dot and how it works, right? Because you're going to have a better elemental setup. So for this, we're at 225. Obviously, I've picked up a nice Riven. Because these weapons aren't used at all. It's a wonder what you can pick up for 40p on Warframe Market. And this, you can see the damage difference. Obviously, this isn't like a Riven review. So 95k is what we had before. We'll throw her max so I can't cast anymore. And now the dots are over 100, 225, 474. Much more respectable numbers. 775, 845. 378, 407. And now let's add the arcane in. So I'm seeing 155s, quarter mils, 196, 379, 169, 112s. Most of the dots are over 100k. 49k, a little baby one there on the end. 103, 304. You get the gist, right? So these are really, really strong as well against the current enemy. So flex slot right here, you can figure out where you want to put it. If you want to try to jack this all the way up to reds, you absolutely can. Even with the Riven that I have with Galvanized Crosshairs, Overcharge, and PPG, Prime Pistol Gambit, I can hit almost solid reds. And because it's got the 5-dot dispo, nobody uses these. They're still pretty cheap. So you can pick up a nice Riven and go in like really, really hard on the electricity dot for like a different Murmur killer, right? Especially with Caliban, because these combine really easily. And I'll show you basically how it's used. It's an instant pop. And it doesn't even need to be those. We'll use our handy dandy exos. Alright, so I want everybody to be surprised when I kill stuff that's armor shredded. With an electricity dot. I know, wow, right? Unarmored enemies getting killed with electricity, it's fucking wild. But basically, with Caliban specifically, you can cast your 2, gives you vulnerability, and a little bit of CC, then you combine it, so you cast 2, cast 4, drag them in, get the vulnerability, get the full strip, and then you, as they're all grouped up, you throw your Castanas onto it, pop, right? Pretty simple. And you have to make sure to fire again. Okay, the other one that was a bit of a surprise, we're going into melees. All the way down here at the bottom, the Dark Split Sword. Now I know this, it's the heavy blade variant, but the dual swords are down here also. And And these are actually really fucking strong against the enemies that we're using. Where normally you have to mod for radiation, all of the dark weapons have radiation innately on them. And for those that don't know, just a brief explanation. If you look at the dark split sword, was sort of, I guess, the weapon that came out with like the stance forma, if I remember correctly. So depending on the stance, so like if you put Carving Mantis into it, the stats will change to dual swords, right? So it's 25% crit chance, a 2.5 crit multiplier, 15% status. But if you look at it, has puncture, slash, and radiation. Which in terms of like raw damage, obviously the slash gets murdered. Puncture isn't too bad. But if you throw on the heavy blade, the stats change, and it turns into a little bit more of a status weapon. The crit multiplier goes down, the crit chance goes down, but the status chance goes up, and the base damage goes up. So it can transform on will, however you want to mod for it, right? You can change it into a heavy blade or a set of dual swords. But due to the new arcanes that we have and everything, it's really, really easy to get decent damage out of this because it just sort of, it's not a very strong weapon, but it just sort of checks enough boxes to where the damage is fine. Now, if you're running like a Latum or like the Incarnon weapons, obviously it's not going to compete with that. But just for people that want to run something different, this is a surprisingly strong weapon, and it's a really standard dot build, right? Condition Overload, Blood Rush, Gladiator Might. It'll get you into oranges. Weeping Wounds, because we're trying to deal an electricity proc, so electricity and radiation are really strong against the Murmur. Smite Murmur. If you want to run it, you can. You can do double crit damage, and it wouldn't hurt anything. Run that. You get the higher crit multiplier, you are dealing dot damage. Prime Reach, pretty standard. Attack speed, and obviously a 90 mod to help with your dot, right? And it also gives weighting. So radiation gives you, helps you out in the modded damage, so your raw damage, or the damage that you deal on hit, is going to be bolstered a little bit by radiation. Electricity is obviously the dot you want to deal. Melee influence is bugged to hell and back. But this absolutely jacks up that damage even more. And all you got to do is figure out which Tennokai mod you want to run. I'm a fan of Opportunity's Reach. Gives you more time to react. You can get the trigger. You can carry it to the next group of enemies. And then you can get the additional range, and it'll give you the 3 increase, knock you up to 8.4, which is really nice. Obviously not as crazy as you can go. Dreamer's Wrath for more damage. And Discipline's Merit so you can spam those heavies, right? But I would have figured this would have increased. Obviously, these numbers are from last year, so I'm expecting this to go up, but like radiation, like corrosive, like a radiation corrosive heat build, you can make it work on this. But these are all options. And we're actually going to do an Exterminate Steel Path run with this setup. It's not very sweaty at all. Oh, and another one just to sort of drive the point home that some weapons, you can make the Javlok work. I threw a couple Forma onto it and an SP Arcane. Just starting from the bottom, Carmine Penta. The Pentas fell out a favor. The Carmine, the Pentas as a whole, they had like their last bastion of like dedicated users was kind of mag. But now we have like the tenant weapons. Like the Carmine Penta, how's that gonna compare to like an Archiplasmorn, right? And the Carmine Penta is not the better one. So there's a different variant. This is justified. The Simulor. There's a Syndicate version. Snipetron. There's a better version. Supra. The Vandal. Panthera. There's a Prime. Parasist. This is the first one where, like, it's just kind of out of place. You could use it with Caliban, since we're using him. Because you can get pure viral very, very easy with just the 165 cold. But Overguard is an issue. So I feel like this .04 is justified. Mutilus Quanta is reasonably strong sometimes. You can do really weird things with the alt fire, and that's probably the people that are using it with the .04. You can shove that status onto a lot of things that I don't think you should be able to. Carrick Wraith. There's the Kuva version, Sporothrix. That's not going to be .4 for long. We just got the augment for that. Secura Penta. This was probably Magmains also. Flux Rifle. There's the Tenet version. Catch Moon. What a Fall from Grace. .04. Also kind of Power Crept. Still relevant though. Prisma Tetra. There's the Tenet version. Galaxion. There's a better version. The Vandal. Zeus. There's the Prime. Bratton Vandal is a bitch to farm. So this is generally one of the weapons. Like if I would be willing to bet somebody hasn't farmed something, and they're like LR4, LR3, the Bratton Vandal's probably on that list of things they haven't done. Because it's an ESO reward. You have like a percentage to get it from ESO. So the first one where it's like it's easily accessible, there's no trouble getting it in any way, shape, or form, is the Javlok. You just run Grenadier missions. You'll get enough eventually, right? I forget the name of the guys, but you get the parts for this, the Javlok parts. It's not an adjudicator, but they got the colored shields, and they spawn in, and you get like that warning, and then you're like, oh hey, what is it? And then you turn, and the guy's dead already. They used to be kind of horrifying, like years ago, but now they're not anything, right? They have the different colors. Most of these other ones are just going to stay down here, like the Ferox. You have the Tenet version, Strun Wraith. You got Prime, Hema. That's probably an accessibility issue. Gorgon, you got the Prisma version. Raktacernos, you got the Prime. So there's different versions, and these are like the worst versions. So the Javlok is like the first one where it's like kind of dog shit all on its own, and even then, you can still get like 1,000,000 damage on a headshot. Okay, like you can still get 1,000,000 damage on a headshot. So let's get some exos in. Now the main issue is that this is not auto fire, and that's one of the things that does kind of suck. But I'm pretty sure that this was the first one. Got the little throw and the AoE, knocks everything on its ass. But just from the multipliers from the Arcanes and the Galvanized mods, and having decent mods, everything ranked up. The damage is still not tremendous, but considering how old it is, like it's not Acrid old, I don't think. Actually, I kind of forget when this came out, but it's not Acrid old. Acrid is like ancient. So 40, 30k, 59, 70k on a headshot, 646, 700k. Not the best, not the greatest. Obviously, different multipliers would help out. But just modding the way that we are, it's a very general use. It's innate heat. We're doing a corrosive build with like a general buff and 100 munitions, merciless. We haven't leaned into anything. Like, I guess if you wanted to do a level cap build for this, God help you, you would go pure heat. It's got the unique trait, alt fire throws spear gun, consuming magazine to cause a heat explosion, damage increased by 20% for each round in magazine when thrown. You can get some pretty nice numbers out of this if you really want to mess around with it. And you're willing to hit a headshot. I'm not suggesting anybody do that, but like, you can definitely get some like level cap viable damage out of it. But don't miss. Okay. So pretty basic. Corrosive heat, prime shred to just get the fire rate up. And 100 munitions is going to be our dot. We're running Nourish on Caliban to help with energy, so that's going to be helping us out here also. So, viral corrosive heat. So, pretty generic build. But yeah, let's go ahead and do, and here's the builds again. Let's go ahead and do some Steel Path Whispers content. And obviously, he's not going to do as well as some other frames. Obviously, he does kind of deserve his ranking. But for the love of God, he's not that fucking bad. Like, you can run him in Steel Path. It's just when they removed his ability to shield gate constantly. That was kind of his survival mechanic. I mean, those little ancients explode anyway. Alright, we're on Steel Path. Deimos. Exterminate Steel Path.
Your weapons make music.
Oh, and also the Caliban drip, before we get into this. Tenogen helmet. Tenogen back. I like these sentient Cyandanas. And the... What is it? The Void accessories. Obviously not on the left shoulder. And the electricity ephemera from Kuva's. And we're just going to make our way through this. It's not going to be super fast. Because we're using the Javlok right now. Once we swap over to the other ones, it'll go a little faster. But just showing you can build up stacks. Even on truly garbage weapons. So this is currently, I guess you could say, the floor of how bad stuff can perform without going like Mark 1. Like, this is something that people don't want to use, I guess you could say. And even then, it's still not that bad. Obviously not going to be level capping with this damage. Especially without a prime mod. Though technically, I guess you could do like a heat inherit build. Yeah, we'll just swap over to the Castanas. But yeah, you can get a taste of it. That's the least wanted primary with no variance. Like, obviously there's other weapons in the category, right? Like you get the Pendant Ferox, which is decent. So like we get the corrosive stacks. You notice standing this. They're gone relatively quickly because of the minus 75%. And electricity does really good against overguard, so it's if you're full stripping. Oh, what did I pick up? Secondary? Okay, that's nice. Here's what my damage would look like if I did red crits. Which I don't right now. Or normally. So about 100k. You're obviously gonna want a full strip. We get our vulnerability onto stuff, they tend to pop. Where's he at? Just let the dot do the work. One of the good things about electricity dots is they deal with overguard pretty well. Noodle Eximus is gonna noodle Eximus though. It's just a lot of health. Let's get our overs back. Excellent. Alright, now melee, since we got a couple of kills left. Obviously melee influence. Alright, so in that circumstance, the volatile took our health, just cast, figure out where the hell the damage is coming from, cast, get away from it, and your shields will start regenning instantly. So I can stop losing combo. Downside of running Nourish is it fucks up your weightings. Yeah, because it's combo counter build, obviously you need stacks. If you want to lean into any of the weapons, obviously build accordingly. Like strike would increase your melee output, accelerate for primary. Probably damage for the secondary. Instead of the, like, you wouldn't want to do velocity, right? But even the least wanted of the weapons still does steal path, still kills. Obviously kill rate is going to be the big deciding factor. You're not going to level cap, so it's up to you. This is just showcase what the community hates. Obviously the rankings and everything don't take into account like the newer content, really. Like, I didn't have a lot of time to impact it, if at all. So even like the worst ones, still viable, still usable. And I'll just go over the builds. Like, the Javlok is probably the worst. It does better against Grineer, obviously because of its setup. Heat, corrosive. If you want to run acceleration, you could also just like completely well round and also, more importantly, get another element for galvanize to grab a hold of and run acceleration on the frame, and that'll give you corrosive radiation, heat. Nourish will give you viral, and that is a wonderful, wonderful generic setup against the Grineer. And 100 munitions is the dot that you kind of want. Heat when the armor is stripped shines more. So there's plenty of ways to set it up. Shred isn't super helpful here, but it's what I'm going to be using if I decide to run this again. Sancti Castanas, forced electric, forced electric, forced electric, forced electric. It's the Zorus but a pistol, and it's got a 165 mod. So other than that, however you want to run it, Hornet Strike and Merciless, definitely a combination. You're obviously not going to have a Riven, so you got a flex slot. Faction goes here. And Crosshairs, I show you how to use it. You can keep the stacks up surprisingly easy on the Sancti Castana. And it's not too painful. You're regularly aiming with these. It feels supernatural regularly aiming with this. So you could definitely make use of it, and instead of doing like velocity, do base damage, right? For the arcane, if you want to buff these, and that'll be better than the Riven. Maybe not crit damage wise, but that's 300 additional or 180 additional base damage. You could even do Merciless. here for even more base damage. Um, or, you know, get a cheap ass Riven all on your own. Ideally, crit damage, electricity weighting. Crit chance is nice, but it doesn't feel like it's required on the Riven. Obviously, it does get us over 100, but with Prime Pistol Gambit, we're almost at 70. Crosshairs and Overcharge get us decent into reds. So, food for thought, and don't forget about the Dark Split Sword. If you're not doing level caps, and you're just running around wanting to beat the shit out of stuff, and you don't want to run like Incarnon weapons all the time. Obviously, dual eye cores are super super nice. There's a lot of frames that can jump on that damage. Saren is obviously god tier with him right now. But if you just want something a little bit different, this is a really, really solid weapon against the enemies on the Murmur, with the Murmur faction. Obviously, you're not going to have the Riven. This was for a Puncture Delete. And you could obviously still go Smite the Murmur. Keep your oranges. Melee Influence will be as busted as ever. So, little bit of a rant, little bit of a PSA. And Caliban's fine. He just doesn't do level cap super well, but he's fine for Steel Path. Jesus, everybody dumps on this guy. He's fine. I've since I saw the ranking, I've taken him up to 2 hours. He's fucking fine. Okay, like 2 hours in a Mott survival, or hour in a Mott survival, 2 hours in a conjunction. Okay, so I can't vouch for level cap. I don't have a level cap build for him, but an hour to 2 hours, if that's where you spend most of your time, Jesus, he's perfectly fine for that. Anyway, PSA over. All the weapons work because the multipliers are so strong. It really doesn't even matter what the weapon is. So anyway, take it easy, guys. Have a blessed day, and I'm out.